Today we're going to work with people pleasing. There's a lot of variation in intensity with that. Please feel free to pause anytime to explore something more deeply, to let that resonate, to regulate back into the present moment. Somatic mindfulness can allow us that awareness, and then we can use these regulating tools or just take a break so that we can go into a deeper inquiry about something. So I'm going to start with the more extreme, which is fawning. Pete Walker is such a good resource on anything to do with fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and in particular, how to work with it. So it's really helpful to understand it. Fawning is the underbelly of people pleasing. And I recognize that most of us here aren't fawning in the extreme way that he's talking about here. He's talking about fawning as a survival mechanism, like fight, flight, and freeze. And just like all of those, we might have tendencies, we might have something that's a bit left over from our childhood, but I thought it would be helpful to understand the clinical, Pete Walker is a therapist, and the clinical view on fawning and how it relates to survival. And one of the reasons it's helpful to notice that or to know that is that then we maybe aren't shaming ourselves quite as much. Seeking safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. It's a way to keep ourselves safe. This is probably something that most of us could relate to on some level. The price of admission to any relationship is that we give up our needs, rights, preferences, boundaries. We learn as a child to be a helpful and compliant servant. People adapt in terms of if I can keep my parent happy and connected with me. We all have that part of it, is that our best chance of survival is that we can keep our parents or caregivers or adults on our side. So one of the things that happens with pressing a child into codependent service is that it scares us. We get scared and shamed out of developing a sense of self. So if the fawning is part of your history, you might remember not expressing a need around what restaurant to go to or what movie to watch, or no, I kind of disappear and then let everybody else take over. The Fawn types are the most developmentally arrested in their healthy sense of self, which means that as adults, we're going to need to practice and recover some of that. He talks about healthy relating, that people move easily. There's reciprocity there. There's a back and forth. So sometimes we talk, sometimes we listen. But codependency has an element of it's not okay for me to express my needs. And part of that is that we're pretty convinced that we're not going to actually get help, that the way that we pay for our relationships is by being helpful to other people. But also there's a fear here of, well, what if I express myself and they don't like me? So this is a fear-based inability to express our rights, needs, and boundaries in relationship. And I like what he says here about a disorder of assertiveness, because that gives us a lot of room. If I'm scared to be assertive because of my background, because of my experience, I don't have to shame myself for that. I could just look at that and go, okay, I'm susceptible here. I have a dormant fight response. If we look at this, we could start to ask for help instead of offering care, or have a better balance of that. Instead of always trying to elicit other people expressing themselves, that we could take a deep breath and express ourselves. If we feel anger, or if we have a sense that there's some there, but we're not really in touch with it, then that's something that we could work with accessing more, even as a practice that can be helpful. Recovering from this fawn response, learning about it, this psychoeducation that we're doing is really helpful. Stopping the shame, because this is something that happened to us generally as a child. This is when we developed this. But it's also a response to our power position in society. We have a power down position as a child. We rely on our adults to take care of us. And we often have a power under position as an adult as well. Your boss, somebody around you who's a bully. If we can understand this as a survival response, then that makes it a little bit easier to see more clearly. So we have that more accurate neuroception. But then we can also catch ourselves when we apologize for everything. Apologizing, but feeling responsible for other people's bad moods. And then to reclaim our anger. and reclaim being assertive and reclaim that it's safe enough for me to have needs and then to express that in relationship. And can I be strong and resilient enough to tolerate that if it doesn't work out? Expression of it takes some strength and resilience, but then if it doesn't work out, then how am I going to handle that? Let's work with this a little bit. One of these might resonate with you. Could work with that in the inquiry. So I have the right to have my own feelings, beliefs, opinions, and preferences. That's what I'm using as an example. If something else has a stronger resonance for you, to work with that. I have the right to be treated with respect, to say no, to make mistakes. Sometimes when we make a mistake, we're shamed as though like we're the mistake. And we might be shaming ourselves that way too. That we don't have to accept or listen to or act on unsolicited advice. We can negotiate for change in a relationship, for instance, which we've been doing if a friendship's not working for us anymore, and we have some idea about how that might be made more nourishing. We could ask for that. And the right to protest sarcasm, destructive criticism, unfair treatment, that's something that we would decide. But there isn't an automatic, it's never safe enough to do that. We could really check in if that's what's happening, if we're around somebody who's really sarcastic with us or who shames us. We might still decide not to confront that, but we could have a different inner relationship with it. And we might decide, okay, I have the right to feel angry about this and I'm going to express it. I'm not going to go into a fight response. I'm going to be grounded, but I'm going to express that. And the right to ask friends for some help and emotional support. Not exclusively one way, but that's something that we could ask friends for. So let's go into the inquiry. Bring to mind a friend, somebody that you tend to be a little bit more people pleasing around, or maybe go into a fawning response. And choose whichever one of those, or you could use this example I have here of that. And take a moment here to let yourself be in your body, notice your breath. Look around the room, notice I'm actually not sitting in a room with that person. I'm not about to have an uncomfortable conversation with them. I'm doing an inquiry, I'm looking. So every time we get a little too intense, we could just open our eyes, look around, notice that we're here in this moment. Before the inquiry, you might bring to mind an image of them, maybe an example of something that they've said. Well, that's just stupid if you are expressing your opinion that they don't agree with. So let yourself feel into that. What is it that you're going to work with? Who is it? Which one of the human rights? So let yourself get a little bit charged up with this. And then we're going to work with how you're going to respond. So, not how you've responded in the past. Maybe you went into a fight response. Maybe you fawned. Maybe you just got out of there. Maybe you went numb. This time, we're going to do this from being emotionally regulated, grounded, strong. We're an adult. We know and have the capacity to figure out how I feel about something. And we have the right to address it. So, when you say that, when this happens, whatever example you're working with, I feel maybe the first layer of that could just be to express that to yourself. How do you feel when that happens? So go into your body. What does it feel like when somebody activates you in that way? And you can stay with this part of it as long as you like. Breathe, your eyes open if you want. If there's an image that's really intense, you could put it on the other side of the room in a frame. Otherwise, just stay with it. It's uncomfortable. I feel angry, maybe. And then imagine that you're saying that to this person. So you're not flipping out, you're just getting in touch with how you feel. And then you're going to say, when you say that, I feel that you think I'm stupid. Or I feel like you're ignoring me. I don't have any room to be me in this relationship. When you do that, I feel like you're just doubling down and trying to convince me that you're not listening. What might you say? You could try out a few different things. Notice how you feel as you're doing that. in your body? What are the thoughts in your mind as well? And if you want, you could also imagine their response to you. And you could base that on what you think is likely to happen based on your past with them. Well, that's ridiculous. Or that's not what's going on here. They might gaslight you. They might go into an anger, a fight response. They might flounce out, offended. Well, that's how you feel. Forget it. This is over. Based on what you suspect might be their response, let yourself sit with that for a moment. Notice the look on their face, tone of their voice, and as you're doing that, you might hold your own hands. Remember to breathe. Notice sensations, energy in your body. And notice what your impulse is. Do you have an impulse to escape, to fight back? Are you going kind of numb? Oh, this is hopeless. I knew they wouldn't listen. Or do you go into people pleasing? Oh, I didn't really mean it like that. Oh, please don't be upset. Forget I brought it up. I didn't mean to upset things. These are four of the major survival responses, and we go into survival responses when we feel a threat. Notice what your body wants you to do, what your nervous system is signaling for you to do, and then come back into regulation. Take some breaths. Notice your feet. Open your eyes. We have the right to do this in relationships. Even if it's uncomfortable, we have the right to have our own feelings about it, and we have the right to express those to a friend. And the result of this might be that we end the friendship or that we put different kinds of boundaries around it. The result also might be that they respond really well. I didn't really realize I was doing that, or, I know I have a habit of doing that, and I'm so sorry. I'll really be careful and not do that again. So you could imagine some different outcomes. Our nervous system probably will go with a negativity bias and go with the worst possible one, but we could also bring in some other options. And if you feel angry, you might, from this grounded, regulated place, express that. I feel angry when you talk over me and when you think you know better than I do what's going on inside of me. Or I feel angry. Notice how you feel inside. And then if you wanted to say something to them, what would that be? And then let's take a moment to rehearse that as well. I'm angry that keep breathing. If you notice that you're shaming yourself, see if you can come back to some kindness for yourself. We don't decide to be subservient or people please or do fawning. This is a response to perceived danger or threat, something our nervous system assesses, not always correctly, and then we work with that. Whatever is activated in us, we're just checking to see, what does that feel like? What's activated in me when I take a bold step and say, this is how I feel? Notice thoughts, notice sensations and energy. Notice if you're trying to escape, if you've gone numb. Now let's set that aside. Look around the room again. So we can work with the same memory that you were just working with, or maybe something else would come up. We're going to get kind of clinical about this. When we think about fawning to somebody, or it might not be that strong, it might be more that we avoided being honest, or that we didn't say something somebody said a joke that we find offensive and we didn't say something. It's a continuum from always being ourselves to sometimes going into people pleasing. What was the threat that activated your survival response? Activated you into fawning or people pleasing? It might be a present moment thing, it might be a long term habit. Oh, I don't care what restaurant we go to, you choose. And how does it feel in your body as you remember that? If you feel shame around that, probably there's a shame response. You might have noticed that you have a feeling of heaviness in your chest, for instance, or maybe you've slumped over. So, if that's the case, you could bring your collarbones back up. Look around, look up, give yourself a few deeper breaths. Whatever part of you it was that was feeling threatened, whether that was inner child, a younger self, whether that's something that happened yesterday, bring that part of you into your heart. This is a part of you that's scared to say what you think or to bring something up. Scared to set a boundary, scared to express your needs, is scared to say, I'm not very happy that all the time that we are together, 90% of the time, we're talking about you. I want to be more present in this relationship, but I'm scared to do that. Some of this we might be saying to ourselves. Sometimes we might say that to the other person. But do you feel shame about that? And if you do, how does that feel? Or do you have that inner critic really going after this? Well, you're weak, you're disgusting. So notice all of those might be present to some extent or another. Feel the fear or the shame. You might have some criticism of yourself. And bring all of that into your heart. Visualize yourself comforting that part of you. It might be physically. You might imagine that you're giving them a hug. There might be a certain age. It might be a bit broader based, not really that specific. With that sense of that part of you that's scared and that goes into people pleasing sometimes, imagine that you're reassuring them. You're safe now. And literally, we are. We're safe in this moment. We're not talking to them. We're doing a somatic inquiry. We're doing a practice. Anytime we want, we can open our eyes, look around the room, and notice I am actually safe here. And what we didn't have in the past was a supportive adult self. So we could be that for ourselves. You're safe now. I've got you. I don't shame you for this. I don't expect you to be perfect for this. I'm just holding you in my heart. This is difficult. I understand more now what's going on in the nervous system and what was going on when I was younger. And I'm able to bring my adult self into this so that you can feel safer. You're not in any danger at this moment. You're safe now. And even though in the past, maybe my inner critic was talking and maybe I was going into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response when I feel threatened, right now in this moment, I'm just bringing you into my heart. And take a few breaths. Let yourself feel your own kindness for yourself. Holding the space for yourself. As we come out of the inquiry, one of the things that we might notice is that when we feel safer, we don't need to fawn or people please. We don't need to go into any of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The fact that we've gone into it in the past and the fact that we still might go into people pleasing just means that we're still perceiving a threat. And when we receive that kind of information, our nervous system wants to help. So they take us into some kind of a strategy to help us survive the threat. That's all it is. We're not weak. We're just human beings with a nervous system. And when we perceive threat, we try to help ourselves be safer. Let yourself feel into that. We can really support ourselves with our own love and compassion and understanding. We're not broken. We're not awful. We're not bad. We're just a human being that's had some experiences that have led us into these survival mechanisms, and now we are able to look at it in a different way. And we can always offer ourselves kindness and compassion.